Welcome to today's webcast. It's day one of Plagiarism Education Week, and we're so glad you can come and join us. My name is Ray Huang. I am your moderator today, and you guys are in for a treat today because, as you see, this webcast, we're going to get a lesson in understanding plagiarism with help from Dr. Seuss. Now, before we do totally get started, I would like to thank the sponsors of Plagiarism Education Week. We have the International Center for Academic Integrity, Plagiarism Today, the School for Ethical Education, Nightly, that's the National Institute for Technology and Liberal Education, and also the 6th International Integrity and Plagiarism Conference. That's a plagiarism conference taking place in the UK in June. Now, there are just a couple of things I'd like to mention, and as a nod to Dr. Seuss, we'll call them Thing 1 and Thing 2. Thing 1, if you do want to join the conversation on Twitter, we will be using the hashtag Pew2014. And also, you can also follow us on Twitter at Turnitin and on Facebook.com/Turnitin Teachers. Thing 2, each day, Turnitin is going to be selecting one attendee from the webcast when you take our survey there in the web links area to let us know how we did on this particular webcast. So each day we're going to choose one of our attendees and donate $100. We're going to do this through donorschoice.org. That's a nonprofit online charity that helps students in need. All donations go directly to public school classroom projects. So do take our survey at the end of the presentation. Let us know how we're doing. Today, our guest presenter is Stephen Fox. Stephen is a psychology lecturer at the University of Hawaii Maui College and at Hawaii Pacific University. He earned his PhD in cultural psychology at Victoria University of Wellington, way down in New Zealand. So now that the formalities and introductions are done, it's time to learn and have some fun. So Dr. Fox, I'll turn you loose for understanding plagiarism with help from Dr. Seuss.
Aloha kako from Hawaii. Kia ora to the couple of Kiwis I saw signing in. Okay, a little bit about us first. I have been working on this for a couple of years with my wife, Nani Osman, and we both teach psychology. She teaches a couple of high school classes also. It's not the AP classes, rather it's the dual enrollment. She and I met in graduate school at University of Hawaii at Manoa, and her area is teaching, learning, and cognition. That is kind of important in terms of how we discussed and designed this system. I did my master's at Manoa, and that's in community and cultural psychology. And then I did my PhD in Wellington, New Zealand at the Center for Applied Cross-Cultural Research. So my area of expertise is more in terms of culture, which I think comes into play in this. Okay, so going on. I'll go through the purpose of our program a little bit, our method, our rationale, and some ideas for future directions in where we might go later. Okay, our purpose. The purpose of our program is prophylaxis for the persistent plague of plagiarized papers, which I'm sure you have all experienced. But rather than discuss our method now, let's dive in and show you how. Here's the way our talk is done. Give it a try and have some fun. I figure it's better. We're both big fans of experiential learning. So I think rather than explain it first, let's just dive in there. We're going to use a snippet from Green Eggs and Ham by Theodor Seuss Geisel, which he wrote in 1960. He will use APA format for citation style. And if you would imagine that your assignment is to write a paper about, say, perceptions of unfamiliar food, and so you're going to use Green Eggs and Ham as one of your sources for how you're going to explain yourself. When we do this presentation for students, we use kind of a few slides that explain plagiarism so when they start into our quiz portion of it, they should have a clear idea if they don't already. And I think that the Turnitin folks are going to put up a version of our student presentation. Okay, so here we go. If you will take a look at each sentence and vote for whether or not it is plagiarism. And we'll discuss each one as we go along, which is what Nani and I do when we do it for students. Okay, good luck. Many people do not like green eggs and ham. Is this plagiarism? So if you'll vote in the voting window there, give it just a little bit longer. And it seems like everyone is saying no. Okay, I guess let's keep going on. Ray, you can let me know if I should wait longer or something like that. We say yes, it is plagiarism because do not like green eggs and ham is taken directly from someone else's work, in this case, Geisel's, and it's word for word, and there's no citation. Okay, so now you get the idea of what we're doing, and we'll go on to the next one. Many people, quote, do not like green eggs and ham, unquote. Is this plagiarism? So if you'll just vote in the voting window. Wow, going fast this time. All right, we'll give it just another moment here. And yes, we say it is plagiarism because do not like green eggs and ham is in quotes. So we're showing that it is someone else's words, but there's no reference. So if we were marking a student paper, we would be saying, sorry, Charlie, plagiarism. Okay, let's go on. Many people do not like green eggs and ham. Citation Geisel, 1960. Is this plagiarism? Oh, I should have. I see a question about the text of green eggs and ham. Usually, if we're doing this for students, we would start out by reading about the first 12 pages, and the phrase "I do not like green eggs and ham" appears on page 12. Ooh, pretty balanced on this one. Okay. Yes, it is plagiarism because there is a citation, but the phrase "do not like green eggs and ham" is word for word, and the lack of quotes would say that it's not someone else's words. So we say that is plagiarism. Okay, many people, quote, "do not like green eggs and ham," unquote, Geisel 1960, page 12. And keep in mind, we are using APA format here. Is this plagiarism? Wow, we've got a lot of votes coming in. This is exciting. Okay, let's go on. So, no, this is not plagiarized. So, do not like green eggs and ham is in quotes, and it has the correct citation, which in APA has the author, year, and page. But this is not really much of a paraphrase. I mean, what we're trying to do as instructors is get our students to encapsulate meaning. And just by putting "do not like green eggs and ham" in quotes, yeah, it's proper, but I really wouldn't particularly give this much of a high rating if I were grading it. Okay, going on. Many people dislike green eggs and ham. Geisel, 1960. Is this plagiarism? Okay. Um, we say yes because it's not really paraphrased at all. We just have one word replaced. Do not like is replaced with dislike, but it's pretty much the same thing that Geisel wrote. Okay, how about this one? Many people have a strong distaste for forest-colored fowl embryos and cured domesticated pig products. Is this plagiarism? We've got a lot of no's coming in. Okay, shall we go on? We say yes, because it's not really paraphrased at all. The structure is quite similar, and in case you don't agree that it can't be quoted because it's not a quote, it's not Geisel's words, but here's our rationale. If you examine the sentence, have a strong distaste is the same as do not like. Forest colored is the same as green. Fowl embryos is eggs, and is and. Cured domesticated pig products is ham. So we say that's about the same as what Turnitin has listed as the find and replace uh, technique of plagiarism. And thanks to Maestro Ing for helping Nani put that one together. They had a lot of laughs doing that one evening. Okay, let's try this one. Lack of familiarity with particular preparation styles of foods is likely to lead to premature rejection based on ignorance rather than an objective appraisal of the inherent taste qualities of that food. Geisel, 1960. Is this plagiarism? And I see that a couple of people are disagreeing with our assessment, and that's okay. There is a certain amount of subjectivity in judging what is or is not plagiarism. Okay, shall we call this one? Okay, no, this is not plagiarism. Pretty clearly, it's paraphrased. It represents Geisel's intended message, but it's not very readable. And I have to admit, I'm at fault for this one. It pretty much represents what people don't like about academic writing. So let's go on just a little further here. When something is unfamiliar or foreign to us, we tend not to judge it fairly. Geisel, 1960. Is this plagiarism? Okay, I think we can go ahead and call this one and say, no, it's not plagiarism. So it's paraphrased, it's readable, you can understand it, there's no ridiculously long words that are unnecessary for conveying the meaning, and this one is from Nani. I think it's a pretty good way to paraphrase what Geisel actually intended to say. Okay, and we have a few references. We always show our references at the end of our presentation just to show that we too are not above citing and referencing. So let's talk a little bit about our rationale on this. We'll go through a little bit about our philosophical approach, the concept of familiarity and memorability, and fun. So we wanted to come up with something that would work for a wide range of students. Hawaii has a really huge range of demographics. I saw my one of my bosses from Hawaii Pacific University log on a little while ago, and Hawaii Pacific has students from all over the world. The University of Hawaii system has all kinds of students, and UH Maui in particular has a really wide demographic in terms of age and educational background. So we had to come up with something that would cover all these people, and also with Nani teaching the dual credit high school classes, we wanted to make it where it would be pretty much something everybody could get into. Um, One thing that we find very strangely is that pretty much anytime you ask a class what is plagiarism, they come up with a pretty good definition. So it seems like they would know, but then you get a pile of plagiarized papers. And so there has to be some kind of gap here between the theory of plagiarism and the actual practice. And we're both educators because we like teaching. And so if we have a choice of either informing or punishing, I mean, we're just going to go for informing the students. And really, if you want to get down to it, we want to prevent problems. And being psychologists, both of us, we look at underlying thought processes. I, of course, look at a little bit of culture in this. And we find that most students plagiarize because, drum roll please, well, there's a few different reasons. A couple of the big ones that we find are the, oopsie, did I do something wrong? And so this is essentially ignorance. The students are not realizing that what they are doing um, is plagiarism. So if they're unaware of the rules, well, then we need to talk about what the rules are. And we've also been talking to writing faculty about how they get into our classes with a writing prereq without knowing this. The other kind that we see a lot of is the how stupid do you think I am kind, which is where like students ask you for an example of what you want the paper to look like. So you give them an example and they plagiarize straight off the example you gave them. Um, the students who you tell them they have to turn in their own paper, sure, you can work together, but you have to write your own, and then you get two that are identical. Um, and then the one that really frosts our cookies is the people who plagiarize off of Wikipedia, which only makes us sad that we can't fail their paper twice. Is everything okay with audio? I see a couple of audio issues. Okay, so we're attempting to pretty much address both of those issues. The oopsies get the information they need so they can avoid accidents. I mean, things still happen, but we're finding, still on an anecdotal level at this point, that there are fewer accidents. And we'd love to have some help with trying to research how this works out. We get a lot of thank yous after the presentations, which is pretty gratifying. People are like, oh, I didn't know. Thank you so much. Now I understand. And with the How Stupids, I'm sorry that is a little offensive, but when you get these papers that are just so blatantly plagiarized, I mean, written at a level where I couldn't write it like that, uh, you know, it's just like, come on. We give the papers a zero. We generally both allow for corrections, like we'll give them a zero and say, okay, you can get half credit if you resubmit. But there's a couple of risks. I mean, there's some legal concepts that might come into play here, and there's also the possibility of administrative action. People can file complaints. So legally, anybody can sue anybody about anything. And we like to prevent them from having a problem. We also like to prevent ourselves from having problems. So if we've Given this clear presentation explaining plagiarism, I do this for my online classes too. The penalties are laid out in my syllabus. So pretty much we are doing everything. We are doing our due diligence to make sure that students don't plagiarize. Administratively, I mean, it depends on the school. We've taught at a couple of different schools each, and sometimes administrators are kind of on our side, sometimes they're neutral. Some administrators that we've worked with just take the student's point of view no matter what. And that may be prevalent. I've heard some stories from some friends who teach it for profits where they really don't get much support if a student files a complaint. So if we do all this um, very clear explanation, then it's kind of like I think easier for administrators to feel good about backing up the instructor. Um, okay, as far as familiarity, classrooms are cultural settings. The educational system that we have is a very clear extension of European culture that has come down to us over the centuries. Within each classroom, I would describe it as a microculture. And in our little cultures that we create as we introduce our students to our classes, um, well, there are rules, there are norms, there are certain behaviors that are acceptable and not acceptable. And so this is something that we can use. The Dr. Seuss material is something familiar to them. If you approach it as a cultural learning process, so we're building on the cultural knowledge that people already have. We're adding norms, or explicating norms might be a better way to do it, because I hope that all these students grew up with norms of not stealing and not copying. And so what we're doing is we're building on their cultural norms and making it explicit that those are the norms of our classroom culture. And Green Eggs and Ham is pretty widely familiar. There's millions of copies that have gone out in English, and there's a lot of translations into other languages. So, I mean, we're educating at English speaking institutions. So there's a pretty good chance that the students have run across this before. Not always, but, you know, pretty frequently. Memory in learning, it happens most easily if you're associating something new with something old. And so in this case, what we're doing is we're taking something that hopefully is a familiar concept. If not in the first 12 pages, you kind of get the idea of what is going on with the book Green Eggs and Ham. And that familiar phrase is a pretty clear way to say, okay, well, is it the same or is it different? Are you plagiarizing or not? So knowing the story a little bit and knowing the phrase, you can see what the variations are as we go through uh, uh, the different ways of changing the sentence or not. Um, it's also a pretty unusual experience. Sorry, I just had another window pop up. Okay, so having Green Eggs and Ham read in class is pretty funny in itself. And we find this works with high school students, it works with younger college students, it works with older college students. Basically, everybody's cracking up as we're going through this. There's some competition going on, and it's just a wild and wacky experience. So that tends to stick in people's heads. It's also pretty fun. So if you look at what usually goes on with plagiarism presentations, I have seen my students' eyes glaze over very quickly if I just bring up the word plagiarism. So there's no attention span. It's like the kiss of death for, the ones who are going to nap in your class definitely will nap then. So that's not very effective, and learning is not likely to happen in those kind of states. We want people in states of positive affect, and when we do this, usually people are in a good mood, there's a little competition going on, they're laughing, it's memorable, and so instead of this being a miserable thing, it turns into an enjoyable experience. And hopefully they might actually learn something. Woohoo. So bottom line, this happened because at the time we came up with it, we had a 6-year-old, and that's our little angel there. Where there was a whole lot of Dr. Seuss being read in our house. She's 8 now, and we still read a lot of Seuss, and I do think Fox in Socks is one of the greatest works of modern literature. And we had this pathetic pile of plagiarized papers. So what do we do? Do we change careers because it was driving us a little crazy, or do we get proactive and take some action? And so this Dr. Seuss, learning about plagiarism with Dr. Seuss is what we did. As far as where we would like to see this go, we would like to share this, and it is being posted by the Turnitin folks. Um, I suppose you could cite it from this presentation if you wanted to cite it. We'd love to hear from you. I'll put up my email in just a moment. We'd love to hear from you about how this works for you. We'd be happy to go and present because, I mean, you know, we live in Hawaii and once in a while we just have to get away from the great weather. Um, and it would be really good to do some research on this, we think. Does this work really well? It's kind of hard to design, and so we're open to suggestions about that. It's not like we can randomly assign people to quite the right conditions for comparison. And that's it. So I guess we'll go on to questions now.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Fox. Definitely a fun exercise, something that a lot of these educators that have joined us today could use and implement in their own classes. A great way to break things down um, into something as simple as Dr. Seuss, and it's a great approach. You had just mentioned that you're looking for other people's help in collecting information and rolling this out. So Deborah asks, and this is just jumping on, and um, how she's interested in helping. How can she help with the research?
Well, I think the first thing, I would like to address Douglas Thompson asks or states that plagiarism should not equal sloppy attribution, and he asks about intention. I totally agree, and that's why we always let students rewrite. I mean, severity, the how stupid do you think I am is definitely just flat out plagiarism. So to Deborah, I think that if you just want to try out our system, we could correspond a little bit if you actually want to collect data. Um, but basically try it out and let us know how it works. Does it help? You know, what are you seeing happen? Um,
Great. And Wendy asks, may we utilize this material, and if so, how should we go about citing it correctly? I do want to add that if you go down here in the web links area and you click lesson slides and click that browse to link, I think may have popped up for everyone at some point during the presentation. But you can actually download that core part of his slides. That's the part that you can use use with your classes and roll out. Obviously, we should give some proper attribution to Dr. Fox and to Nani as well, Dr. Osman. Um, give them due credit because it is some really wonderful work. So you can either cite this presentation, you can cite it from our teaching tools area, or you can cite them directly, uh, however you want to do it, in whatever format you're you're working in, I guess. Um,
um, yeah,
yeah,
and oh, sorry, Ray. Um,
no, go ahead.
the the version that we have posted has a few slides about, you know, explaining plagiarism at the beginning, and then it has this presentation. We've done it with clickers. We've done it a bunch of different ways, and it can be pretty fun. I think clickers. The survey on this was really nice. I could watch them coming in. Um, so yeah, I would say probably for now cite this presentation. We probably should publish, but we don't really have the data to back it up. Okay.
All right, and we got a question here from D. Robbins. She asked, do most organizations have an institutional-wide definition or policy for plagiarism, or is it usually left to the individual or to the instructor? or anything like that. Do you have any opinions on that or thoughts as far as any of your research goes?
What I find is that broadly usually comes under student code of conduct, and it is generally described there. I think the penalties, there are usually institutional, in my experience, which is not huge, but I've taught at a few schools. In my experience, there are penalties laid out in um, the student code of conduct, which may be um, as severe as expulsion. Um, but there is, of course, some discretion, as we've seen in this. Eh, what is and what is not plagiarism may be a certain amount of subjective judgment, and in general, I try to be um, pretty generous to the students about it.
Certainly, and I guess it should also be said that while a lot of these uh, types of potential plagiarism, you know, the definitions of them are not always hard and fast. It's always, as we saw here, there's it's a little bit up for debate in some cases. So it's really up to the instructor to make sure that you guys understand it. And to tie this kind of back to Turnitin, when you're looking at that originality report and something gets highlighted as matched, it doesn't blanketly mean it is plagiarism, or it could be properly cited, it could be sort of properly cited, but really it's an opportunity to use it as a teaching opportunity, um, to to point them in the right direction and not necessarily approach it with a punitive hand, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
not to sound like a commercial, but for Hawaii Pacific University, I use Turnitin for my classes, and I really love it. I've had students say, "Well, it's not accurate," and sometimes it does highlight something that is not plagiarized. I just tell students, "Look, it's a guide. It's a safety tool for you to be able to check and sleep well at night and be sure that you're not plagiarizing." They tried to put it in at UH Maui a couple of years ago, but it was not put. We have kind of a weird variant of Sakai that's specific to University of Hawaii, and it was not written into the code for the whole system. I find that with Blackboard as it appears at HPU, that the links are really easy and clear, and students they still have to work a little bit to figure it out. But I find that it works really well for me there.
Great, thanks for adding that. And I should add, for those of you that are using Sakai and thinking about using Turnitin, we do have a new integration with Sakai via our LTI tool, our LTI integration. Um, but I think University of Hawaii has a little customized flavor of that, which is going to take a little work to integrate, but we'll get you guys there.
I see a
Yeah,
question from Nisol that I'd love to address, if you don't
sir,
mind.
yeah,
Um, Cross-culturally, what happens is that there is a little research on that, and it seems that individualistic cultures tend to plagiarize more. The U.S. is kind of considered to be the perfect example of individualist culture, individualist values. The collectivist cultures tend to do it less. That would be more like Asia and pretty much the non-Western countries and cultures. So yeah, there are differences cross-culturally. Okay,
yeah,
back to you, Mike.
and sorry to add on that for Nisol. Turnitin, I think at least in the near future, we're going to be working on releasing some data. I don't know exactly when, so don't quote me on that, but we will be able to take a look at how how the levels of unoriginal content, which we use as somewhat of a proxy for plagiarism. These are papers that we've used in our other studies that are more than 50% similar to matching sources. That will probably release something in the not too distant future that will have some national data in it, international data in it. So keep an eye out for that. Martha asks, in your description of fun, you mentioned a competition component to this. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Okay, sure. Yeah, there's a couple of different ways you can approach this. Some people are really non-competitive uh, by philosophy. What I would usually do in an in-person class is I have people raise their hands, to say, is it, a yes or no? Although the clickers are kind of effective too. Um, there is a certain amount of reluctance. There's a saying, um, I think it's in Australia, where they say the tall poppy gets cut off. And there is some reluctance in Hawaii culture, both from the Asian and the Pacific side, um, to sticking out. So people maybe don't always want to raise their hands, but they do tend to get into it, and it gets kind of funny if there's one person who doesn't agree and stuff like that. And you can, if you're nice and friendly and kind about it, it can be really kind of cool. And when they find out that something was possibly plagiarized that they didn't think was, it can be. Um, you just have to try to make it the most fun that you can as you do it.
Great. Maya asks, what do you think, uh, or what age do you think this concept or this lesson should be introduced?
I think probably for citation, we're probably talking high school by the time they're citing. But yeah, our poor child, having two psychologist parents, can already accurately define plagiarism for you. Um, so I don't know if she's a good example, but at 8 years old, she can definitely handle the concept. She is a little bit morally absolute at this point, but you know, I think that she will not be a plagiarizer when she gets older.
All right. Katie asks something that we've actually discussed, Stephen. She says, I'm thinking a quiz might be a good plan for presenting this. What do you think?
I think that's a really good idea. For my online classes, I'm still trying to figure out how to do it because I have it as a quiz in the online. They're supposed to look at my PowerPoints, which is probably not great. I should have something like a narration or a film or something like that, a video that they can watch. But the idea is that they go through each one, and for a certain amount of points, they get to try to answer. Um, I do think that probably having them go through this and then take an additional quiz is a pretty good way to do a learning check.
Great. And let's see, we've got a few more questions we can ask. Tom asks, in my experience, or he says, in my experience, I find that some students are aware of what they're doing, and they do it in the moment of desperation or whatever it is, uh, and and they go out and they don't intend to do it, but then they ended up plagiarizing anyway.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And generally speaking, I always kind of, I'm a big proponent of students, and so I kind of like to assume that they're not, uh, some kind of villains. And that's why we did this thing to be more fun and non-accusatory. You know, um, so, and that is also why we have both adopted the idea of letting them do a rewrite. I do drafts for if I have any kind of sizable paper in a class. I kind of do a scaffolded version of I'll have them turn in an outline and then a draft. And so if they get caught with something plagiarized in the draft stage, they're only losing a couple of points potentially. So that's the way that I try to do that. Also, if I have them turn in drafts, there's much less chance that they're going to get into that desperate state. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Now Lawrence asks, this gets into the legal questions, but you stated that it would be a good idea to head off possible legal action by, talking about plagiarism and what the penalties are in the syllabus. Now, is that something that you typically do in your classes? have some statement in your syllabus? And if so, do you have any examples of, what those statements say, or maybe you know it off the top of your head?
Um, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what I do, but I do draw from, um, I typically load my syllabi with the schedule up front, the book and the schedule, and then this is kind of in the fine print section of it. But I will have the passages from the relevant student code of conduct, um, and I usually have some kind of a statement that says that plagiarism is not tolerated, blah, blah, blah. I have not checked it with a lawyer. I'm hoping that I don't get sued, but there is, in general, what we find is that there's a lot more of a kind of a feeling among people that students are customers and that we should satisfy our customers, and an unsatisfied customer gets disgruntled, and if we have flunked a paper for a blatant plagiarizer who refused to rewrite, then we could be affecting their educational outcomes. And so I don't want to be held responsible for that. So I just try to make it as clear as I can. If there are any lawyers out there, I'd love to have some advice on it. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
well, I suppose in your analogy there of the student as customers, if you're plagiarizing, they're sort of shoplifting their way through. Uh, class.
Absolutely,
They
yes.
may buy some product, but they've got something that's tucked in their waistband. How nicely you want to treat them.
I
Um,
like that. Thank you.
you're free to use it. I make that public in the public realm. Let's see. Barbara asks here. We only have time for a couple more questions, but Barbara asks, in your opinion, how much time do you think we will need to get students in the right frame of mind to write properly?
I would say that it really should start in grade school. Uh, yeah, years, lifetime. I'm sorry, I wish I had something better to say, but certainly this should be a big part of the 100 level writing classes. And if there are, I mean, high school, definitely, this should be a big part of that. So I don't think it's something that can happen overnight. I think it has to be kind of culturally inculcated to work properly. Good question.
And yeah, as you saw, now we didn't publish all the questions and kind of comments that came in while you were presenting uh, your little the student portion of your presentation. Janice asked, do you get resistance from students during the presentation arguing whether your examples are actually plagiarism or not? And if
Oh,
so,
yes.
how do you do how do you deal with that?
Oh, yes, especially the forest-colored fell embryos stage. And that's fine. This is subjective to some degree. Um, but we actually appreciate when they do argue because it means that they're cognitively engaged. So uh, that's a really good thing, we think. And I see Teddy F. Uh, how do we not do Fox and Socks? Well, you know, that's a good question, and I don't know. Somehow we just ended up with green eggs and ham. But as I said, I think Fox and Socks is the most amazing piece of literature ever.
Right, and I believe Teddy F is Teddy Fishman. She's going to be presenting tomorrow, actually, for the early session. In her presentation, from the director of uh, she's the director of International Center for Academic Integrity, and she's going to be talking about harnessing the power of choice and teachable moments in the development of integrity. So do check that out. That's taking place tomorrow morning. So I guess that's a good transition,
Oh,
as
I
we
do
are up.
have one answer. Just briefly, I can answer her actually. I think that we thought that the message of Green Eggs and Ham was something that could be encapsulated better in a paraphrase than Fox and Socks. Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem. We always love the definitive answer. So I do want to thank all of you in our audience here for joining us today, and thank you, Dr. Fox, for sharing this great approach to address plagiarism and understand plagiarism. Great lessons that we can share with our students and our colleagues.
Yeah.
So over here in the bottom right in our web links, you'll see a whole bunch of links. We've got obviously a lot more, or several more Plagiarism Education Week webcasts coming up throughout the week. We got 3 of them tomorrow, actually. So you can click that link and check that out. I also want to do a quick plug for the 6th International Integrity and Plagiarism Conference taking place in the UK in June. And finally, as a reminder, if you take that survey there and the 4th link down, we will enter you into a drawing to get $100, give $100 donation. Well, we'll donate $100 on your behalf, and you get to direct where that goes from donorschoose.org. So do be on the lookout for an email that's going to come. It's got links to all this stuff as well. Take that survey. We love feedback. Your students love feedback. We're all about feedback here, so please uh, do that. And again, we've got the core presentation, the student presentation, loaded up there in our Turnitin teaching tools section of our website over in the lesson plans category. Be sure to check that out as well. Use it in your classes and give us your feedback on how it works for you. Give us feedback, give Dr. Fox some feedback as well. We always appreciate that. So again, thank you, Dr. Fox, for this great presentation, and thank you all for joining us. I hope you can join
Thanks
us
again
for
for having
more. Hope you can join us for more Plagiarism Education Week webcasts all week. Thanks, guys.